One blessing I had from the mission was the opportunity to learn Spanish, which is a beautiful language that I love. It was a little difficult at first to get a grip on. I remember when I was in high school, we had my high school offered Spanish or German, and I really wanted to take German. My grandpa spoke German, and I just thought it was a cool language. That's what I wanted to take. But my dad told me, no, you should take Spanish. It's going to be a more useful language for you. And I remember telling my dad, no, it's not. I really want to take German. And he said, no, you need to take Spanish. I told him, I said, you watch. I'm going to get my mission call, and it's going to be to Germany, and I'm going to be speaking Spanish. And he said, all right, I'll take you up on that bet. And I remember when I opened my mission call and said where I was going, my dad leaned in and said, first thing he said to me was, well, hey, Jake, sounds like you're not going to be speaking German, are you? Which was funny to me, but he was right. High school Spanish was definitely a blessing. I couldn't speak Spanish to save my life, but I came in with at least a basic knowledge of verb conjugation and things like that. Spanish it's really nice because once you can get a handle on conjugations and genders and stuff like that, it makes speaking it a lot easier. One thing to remember when you're learning Spanish is it's all with the tongue. When you speak English, it's very guttural, kind of back here in the throat. But when you speak Spanish, it's all up front in the mouth. And I remember one thing our MTC teacher had us do is he would have us read scriptures, and we'd put a pencil in our mouth. I don't know how that helps, but I know it helped me at least with pronunciation. Another thing that really helped my pronunciation, it was a blessing in disguise because I really did not enjoy it at the time. There were 4 guys from my district in the MTC that we all went to the same mission. And of the 4 of us, I was the only one who had a trainer that didn't speak English. Most of my companions were from Central America, and most of them didn't speak English very well. And so, the other 3 guys that I came to the mission with all had gringo trainers. And I remember when I was getting trained, I was so jealous of that and almost resentful because I was like, these guys have it so much easier. If they don't know what they're doing at the store or, when they're talking to someone, they can just turn to their companion and ask him in English. And I didn't have that because my companion didn't speak English. And so it led to a lot of struggles at the beginning. But I noticed that as I progressed through the mission, my Spanish was a little better, at least my pronunciation, just because I had companions from Central America through the whole first year of my mission, which, like I said, blessing in disguise, because at the time I was not happy about that, but it really did help my Spanish to be a lot better. One thing that is super nice about Spanish is English is weird because we have all these different sounds and silent letters, and it's just weird. In Spanish, every letter is pronounced, and every letter only has one pronunciation. So I still remember someone telling me that English was weird because if you look at Abraham, it has 3 A's, and all 3 A's make a different sound. But in Spanish, that is not the case, which is really nice, especially when you're learning it, because even if you can't speak Spanish, and even if you don't really know what anyone's saying, you can read Spanish, because it is always going to say the same thing. And so I would recommend relying on that. I know that I relied very heavily on that at the beginning of my mission to be able to share scriptures and things like that, just to prepare myself, because I knew that when we got into a lesson, I could read that scripture and be able to do it well to the point that people would understand me, even if I couldn't necessarily express myself very fluently. One thing that was sad is there's a lot of phrases that we have and idioms that don't transfer over to Spanish. So things like, blow them out of the water, holy cow. Although a lot of the gringo missionaries would say Santa Vaca, just because it was funny to us. But yeah, you have to be careful and make sure that what you're saying is actually a phrase in Spanish. Also, don't be afraid to check things with your bishop. If your companion gives you a word that you've never heard of before, don't be afraid to ask your bishop what it means before you start using that publicly. One thing that was interesting with the language is every country kind of has different words that are considered vulgar or bad. And so you'd have missionaries come from Mexico or from Guatemala or Nicaragua, and they come to Honduras, and it was really funny because sometimes, an investigator or a member would say a word, and this elder from a different country would just be shocked. And just in Honduras, it doesn't mean the same thing. And so make sure, I remember one time the district leader called me to ask about a convert, and I used a word that I had heard my one of the members of the ward used, and this elder was just shocked and got mad at me for picking up vulgar words. And I said, well, that's just, I heard it from a member, and he was from Mexico, and apparently in Mexico that was just a horrible word. But in Honduras, not necessarily the best word in Honduras, but it wasn't the same level. And so make sure when you're picking up new words, make sure you're verifying where those words are coming from and what they actually mean, just because you don't want to be in a situation where you use a word incorrectly. Also, you're going to have an experience where you mess up the words. I remember there was one time we were teaching a Catholic man, and he was asking a lot of really good questions, and it was a great lesson. And this was even halfway through my mission, so I was at the point where I felt like I had a pretty good grasp on Spanish. And I remember he was asking about confession. And so in Spanish he said, Eldres, ¿qué creen ustedes de la confesión? And for some reason I heard, ¿qué creen ustedes de la concepción? So I thought he was talking about the Immaculate Conception. And that was a very awkward moment, because I started to go off into this whole thing about, what we believe about Mary, and just I was talking about conference talks and what people have said, and just kind of, it was, and all of a sudden my companion bumped me. He's like, what are you doing? And I said, well, he asked about the conception. And he's like, no, he didn't. He asked about confession. And so you'll have those moments where you just mix up a word and just laugh about it and move on.